Hi there, I'm Katie Clark and this is the Be Successful podcast. Today we're joined by two hugely impressive guests, Peter Belk, Circular Economy Director at BITC, and Tessa Clark, who founded the food sharing app Olio. Both are experts in their field and I am delighted they've agreed to give us some of their time to talk about today's topic, which is the carbon footprint of your business. Businesses in every sector will be wrestling with this dilemma. How can they address their carbon footprint? What steps can they take? And how easy is it to get to net zero? Well, first up, I'm going to talk to Peter Belk from Business in the Community. Their work inspires and supports the businesses to build a resilient net zero carbon economy. Business in the Community is dedicated to helping their members continually improve their responsible business practice. And I wanted to start by asking Peter to explain what a circular economy actually is and how it's related to carbon footprint.
The circular economy is really a different way of thinking about how we create and maintain value in our economy, particularly thinking about the flow of materials and resources around our economy. And if you think of it in terms of our current system and the way that we typically extract natural resources. So we'll chop down a tree or we'll mine some metals. We'll then take those to a factory. We'll turn them into a product which we'll sell to a consumer who will then generally throw it into the waste bin. And if we're lucky, some of that will get recycled. But for the most part, those resources, those materials that were originally extracted are wasted. In a circular economy, what we're trying to do is look at how we can get more value out of those resources as they flow around the economy. So that could be, first of all, by simply using less of them and designing our products to contain fewer materials. It could be by designing them to last longer, be reusable at different stages of their life. Or it could be designing business models that don't necessarily require someone to own the asset, but something more akin to a sharing or a leasing model where those materials are returned back to the manufacturer to be either repaired or to be turned back into another product. That creates a lot more value and it means we retain materials and products in use for a lot longer and we waste a lot less.
Why are businesses so important when it comes to tackling climate change?
Businesses are so important for a number of reasons, really. I mean, first of all, businesses and industry account for a huge proportion of the UK and, well, in fact, global emissions and have the opportunity to kind of influence the way that we all buy and consume products and services. Whilst we see governments working slowly but surely to set national commitments to net zero carbon, business leaders have the opportunity to move a lot more quickly than governments do. About 65% of consumers in the UK expect brands to demonstrate that they're meaningfully tackling climate change. The other opportunity that we've seen is that there's a real opportunity for kind of innovation and exploring new markets, particularly around kind of circular product. We've seen massive growth potential in areas like clothing rental, for example, and other kind of models that are inherently less polluting are starting to gain real traction with consumers.
Where's the best and maybe the simplest place for businesses to start addressing their carbon footprint? You've obviously got a great network. Where are the best examples that you've seen?
The first thing I would say in terms of getting going on your journey is to say don't panic, because I think we're seeing a lot of businesses are really feeling the heat about climate change and the need to set targets and the need to start kind of accelerating action on this agenda. And actually, it doesn't need to be as overwhelming and as stressful as perhaps it might appear. So really, the first thing to do is to understand what are you currently emitting, looking at your meters, looking at fuel cards from your fleet, information around kind of flights that you may have taken or travel tickets, etc. And then there are some really simple kind of carbon calculator tools out there, freely available on the internet, that can help you to calculate what's the volume of carbon or emissions that you've actually created as a business. By creating a bit of a baseline and understanding kind of where you are at today, you have the opportunity to say, actually, this is how ambitious we want to be going forward. These are some of the areas where we might be able to save some of that carbon. And areas, I suppose, we would suggest starting with is to look at particularly how do you use less? So energy efficiency within your offices or in your premises. Installing LED lighting, for example, will typically achieve a 12 to 18 month payback. After that, they last for 10 years or so. Turning down the thermostat in your office by a degree can achieve, an 8% energy saving for the average business. Looking at where you can reduce waste in your offices by, for example, leasing your IT equipment or reselling older IT equipment back to a remanufacturer. Those can achieve big cost savings and, significant carbon savings. There's some simple steps you can take, but the first thing really is to think about what are we currently using and how can we start to set a target and communicate that publicly.
Wow, lots of good tips there. What can businesses expect, though? What are you seeing? Should they expect this to be a linear, straightforward process? Are there going to be obstacles, and how do they overcome those?
So there will, of course, be obstacles. Most of the businesses that set a target, including the big businesses that have, a massive budget behind this, don't know precisely how they're going to meet it yet. And that's fine. Technologies are continuing to evolve, and, we will continue to update and refresh our plans as we go forward. But the key is to set something that will hold your feet to the fire and to basically sort of push forward your ambitions. After that, it's about how do you actually start to reduce your emissions. And then finally, once you've reduced as much as possible your emissions, then you can look at offsetting the rest, essentially. So basically planting trees or investing in peatland restoration or whatever it may be to offset residual emissions that are kind of impossible to get rid of. But of course, there will be obstacles along the way.
Finally, what would your message be to the small to medium enterprises who, despite making up, 99% of the UK business population, might assume that they're not really part of the problem?
If you are a B2B and you're selling your services to a business, at some point they're going to knock on your door and ask you what you're doing about your emissions. So you need to have a good answer for them. The other thing I would say is that consumers, if you're a B2C, consumers, as I've mentioned already, are already on top of this and they can spot greenwashing a mile off. We need to be really clear that there aren't that many hiding places anymore. People are quite well versed in what climate change represents. And the companies that are able to adapt will survive and those that aren't won't survive. I think it's as simple as that.
That's brilliant advice for our listeners. Thank you, Peter. Now I want to hear from someone whose business's core goal is encouraging others to act and live in a sustainable way and taking these vital steps towards a sustainable future for all. Tessa Clark is the founder of food sharing app Olio, and I'm excited to talk to her about how the app strives to help people waste less and stop them going hungry. Tessa is someone passionate about sustainability, the circular economy and zero waste, and a strong proponent of businesses that combine profit with purpose. Tessa, thank you so much for your time today. Your business's entire ethos is guided by sustainability and encouraging a shared mindfulness of others. It's such a simple idea. How did you come up with it?
So the sort of light bulb moment, if you like, for Olio happened 6 years ago. Now I was living overseas and moving back to the UK. And on moving day, the removal men told me I had to throw away all of our uneaten food. Now, I'm a farmer's daughter, so had a sort of a childhood that involved an awful lot of hard work producing food. As a result of that, I have a pathological hatred of food waste. So when they told me just to throw away this food, clearly that is something that I was not prepared to do. So much to the irritation, I stopped packing and instead bundled up my newborn baby and toddler and set out into the streets, clutching this food, hoping to find someone to give it to. Sadly, I failed miserably, but I wasn't to be defeated. So I went back to the apartment. And when they weren't looking, I smuggled the non-perishable food into the bottom of my packing boxes. And that was the moment when I thought, this is crazy, the lengths I'm going to avoid throwing good food in a bin. I knew there was an app for everything. And I just couldn't believe there wasn't an app where I could advertise my food to my neighbours and they could pop around and pick it up. And now there is.
I want to talk to you about some other brands as well. And so we have Evian, for example, who've recently marked their B Corp accreditation, and they've published a live dashboard monitoring their attempts to become a circular company. Do you think this kind of transparency can be beneficial for businesses of all types and sizes?
I think that transparency is critical because consumers are increasingly waking up to the fact that in many respects, I think we're feeling like we've been deceived. I don't think we realise just how detrimental to the planet and to communities sort of model of consumption has been. And as we're starting to realise the truth, I think we're becoming increasingly demanding and are wanting to know, I'm spending my hard-earned money on this. How was it produced? Where was it produced? What sacrifices were or were not made to create it? And I believe that transparency will become just a hygiene factor in doing business going forward. So I like to believe that that's where we're going to get to very quickly.
For business leaders then, how can they effectively communicate with their employees about carbon footprint action? What are the things that they need to get across to get everybody on board?
It has to be a top 3 priority for your business, for every business everywhere in the world. This is a crisis and we've all got to play our part in solving it. And then you need to look at your company's values and make sure that sustainability is reflected in your values. You need to look at your company's KPIs and make sure that sustainability is reflected in that. And once you've done that sort of hard work, and then you need to kind of set yourself some ambitions and some goals, you then need to take all of your stakeholders on that journey and recognize that it's a journey, that you are not perfect, that done is better than perfect, and just start taking small but meaningful actions every single day.
I love that. What success do you think there's been with bottom-up initiatives with employees driving the sustainability agenda in business?
We have experienced that directly at Olio, actually. We have something called our Food Waste Heroes program. So this is a program that enables businesses, in particular supermarkets, for example, or corporate canteens, to have zero food waste. And so we have 30,000 trained volunteers who will collect and redistribute unsold or unserved food from local businesses at the end of the day. And then those volunteers will redistribute it to the community via the Olio app. And we have had a number of clients come to us and really engage with us because they have done employee surveys and asked how satisfied employees are or aren't, etc. And their employees have raised up how angry they are, how upset they are about the fact that they are being paid to throw away perfectly good food every single day. And through voicing that feedback and that opinion, that has directly resulted in action with those businesses preparing to engage with us and take action, and it's resulted in zero food waste locations. So I think that employees, a bit like sort of individuals and citizens, I don't think we've realised our true power. And increasingly people are waking up to that and recognising that if we sort of get together and voice our opinions and demand better of our employees and of our companies, then it's remarkable how quickly action will take place. And in fact, action only takes place when individuals start to demand that everybody does better.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, even for the most hard-hearted, most business-focused person, I mean, it shouldn't really be the main focus, but carbon awareness does come with reputational benefits, right? And consumers are increasingly expecting brands to operate sustainably. Would you agree?
I would agree. I believe that any business that is not operating sustainably, I'd like to think within the next 5 years, but it's probably within the next sort of 10 to 15 years, I like to think that any business that's not operating sustainably will lose the license to exist. We will no longer tolerate it as employees. They just will not be able to attract and retain good quality talent. And customers won't want to buy their products because there'll be so many better products out there that are offering positive environmental and societal impacts.
I wonder, are there any particularly time and cost efficient carbon footprint reducing measures that have worked for you or that you've seen work for other businesses?
Well, I think I always recommend that businesses start off with the low-hanging fruit and just take action sort of tomorrow, whatever that low-hanging fruit might look like for you and your organization, because we've got to stop procrastinating and dithering and delaying and just start taking action. You find that kind of one baby step leads to the next step, leads to the next step. For some businesses, they can have amazing sort of impact just through a whole series of incremental baby steps. There are other businesses that actually do have a much tougher challenge, which is actually their whole business model needs rethinking. So if you are working for a business that produces something that is disposable, for example, in some way, shape or form, broadly, anything that is disposable is not great. And you are going to have to think really deeply about how does that business model and that product proposition transition from being disposable to reusable, for example, which is the most sustainable form of consumption. So different businesses have different journeys ahead of them. And the most important thing to remember is that if you don't innovate, someone else will. And for me, I sort of started out my career in the dot-com sort of boom of the late 90s and early 2000s. And I was working with sort of an incumbent at the time who could see that digital was coming, but was sort of terrified of cannibalizing themselves. As a result, they did not innovate. They just went on this very, very long, slow path of decline because everybody else innovated around them. And I believe that the sustainability revolution will make the digital revolution look like a walk in the park in terms of the scale of impact that is going to happen. And so I really encourage every business to kind of eat your own dinner before someone else eats it.
Tessa, thanks again. We've heard some incredible things today, and I hope you are feeling encouraged to tackle your carbon footprint. It's crucial for your business and it's essential for our planet. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.